Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy the story. This was written by a real human. So please leave a like if you enjoy it to help the channel and subscribe for future content. It's free. Links to the story and Patreon will be in the description. Please go and support the author. Any support is always appreciated. If a human narrator would like to narrate my stories, please contact me. I write these in my spare time between work and my children and just don't have the time or quiet space to narrate them myself. I hope you can understand. Thanks for your time, and again I hope you enjoy the story. And for the love of everything YouTube, this is literature, so please leave my channel alone. Let's get into it, folks. Sky Rain Chapter 16 Orcs June 26, 2025. He had been caught off guard by Tanya, but his brain kicked in, and without letting Jill jerk the blanket off first, he scooped Tanya up and stood, causing Jill to back up, and both women let out a yelp of surprise. Ladies, really? Well, I'm flattered, but I already told you both. He set Tanya down gently on the chair and refastened his belt as he looked at both of them. Excuse me. He walked out the door. Behind him, he could hear the two women having a heated debate behind him. They were too smart to be yelling, at least, he thought as he walked into the kitchen. Dawn was asleep in a kitchen chair, lying on the table with her arms crossed under her head for a pillow. Luke stood watch near the living room window. He had bent a couple of pieces of the blind back so he had a clear shot all the way to the interstate. Amy sobbed softly even while she slept not far away. Seeing him, Luke said, "Mr. Clay, I think that beast came back through last night. It sounded like it went north though." He pointed in that general direction. "I also think I spotted a light moving near the interstate, but I couldn't tell for sure, it was very brief. I figured it might be something reflecting off chrome on a car." Luke shrugged. "I didn't see it again, and that wasn't too long before the beast came through." Clay gave him a pat on the shoulder and said, "Good man, go ahead and take a minute. We'll wake them up in 20 minutes or so and get to moving again while that thing isn't around, preferably." Luke nodded and stood, stretching with a wince as he started rubbing his still injured leg. "God, what I'd give for some coffee," he said as he finally straightened and hobbled over to his pack and began putting things away. Clay looked out the window, carefully scanning the area, but only a couple of birds being chased by a cardinal were the only things he saw. Soon, everyone was awake and ready. Leaving their temporary shelter, the air was still brisk, and they quickly put some miles in before lunch. They ate at a small rest area off the highway. Jill and Tanya continued to vie for his attention and seemed to be having some sort of contest between them. Jill he could kinda understand. They had flirted constantly. But Tanya's flirting was quite aggressive. "Clay, I think there's a person up ahead," came Dawn's voice. She pointed down the interstate. Clay moved forward, staying along the edge of the wood line. He could see a lone figure moving closer. Upon seeing them, he hurried to the other side of the interstate. The man clutched at a long curved knife as he eyed Clay's party. He looked like he wanted to say something but was hesitant. The man was old, and the hand that held the knife was weathered and gnarled from a lifetime of hard work. Clay stopped. "Hey, old timer, be careful up ahead. There's something really big that seems to hang around the interstate for a pretty good stretch," he said, being serious. The man didn't look dangerous. The man stopped. Clay motioned for the rest of the party to keep moving as the old man replied, "Thanks, son. Avoid the next two towns if you're traveling with them." He pointed at Jill and Sigrid. "The folks that claim that place don't seem too friendly to their type. They let me through but took my damn supplies." The man's anger was apparent. Clay nodded. "Near Sullivan is that dangerous beast. It roams along the highway and a little north from what we saw." He shrugged. "We didn't stick around, so we couldn't tell you about other survivors. But they're stupid enough to shoot at the beast." The man nodded at Clay and looked at his group walking ahead. He nodded. "Good luck to you, son. If you're heading to Springfield, don't." He turned to leave. Clay's sister was heading through there. "Why not?" Clay asked. The man paused. "It's nothing but a hive of death." He grimaced under his hood. "Some freaky eyeless, hairless, lion-sized creatures that burrow through the ground and attack in swarms." He was shaking his head. "We lost 21 people just trying to get around that fucking hellhole." Clay swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. Thanks, old-timer." "Here, thanks again for the information." Clay took a can of Spam and 2 bottles of water out of his spatial storage space and placed them on the ground before nodding at him. "Try to stay safe." He waved and quickly caught up with the others. He looked back at the old-timer after he caught up. The man had hurried on after gathering the supplies Clay left. He had a gut feeling that the old man's advice hadn't been bullshit he'd spouted just to get by, so as they neared the next town, Clay said, "We're going around, stay hidden, and follow as close to me as you can." just in case we run into fucking zombies." Everyone nodded, and he began making his way south near Cuba. After about an hour of making their way from house to house, the group came to a 2-lane highway, and after a little while of following it, he finally saw a sign that read Highway 19. It was nearly dark. They had traveled all day and managed to cover a lot of ground, making it several miles down Highway 19 south, and Clay had started to look for somewhere to shelter for the night when they heard screaming coming from the woods ahead and to their left. It was coming from off the highway a bit. Clay could tell from the second scream that rang out. "Stay on guard," he said, hopefully not loud enough for whatever was making that woman scream. And by the second scream, he knew it was a woman screaming. Only a minute later, and Clay could make out the flickering light from a large bonfire about 40 yards into the woods. Then he heard something else. Something large, black with glowing green eyes that stalked past the highway only 10 yards in front of him. He motioned for everyone to stay close, his ears picking up more movement as another large black shape moved past them. A low growl issued from the other side of the highway, and Clay realized they had wandered into the middle of whatever this was. He couldn't quite tell, but he thought it was a bunch of big-ass black cats. Figures seemed to flash in front of the large bonfire, and he realized that being near the fire was probably the best place to be, as he didn't know how many of them were out in the woods. "We need to move closer to the goddamn fire. Preferably without drawing too much attention," Clay said as he started to move. "Be careful and move together or you'll likely be dead." Another scream came from the fire, and they could hear a man's voice rise above everything else. "That's it, scream, you devil. Bring the beasts to us." Clay could just make out the owner of the voice standing in front of a wooden post. A woman was tied to the post, and blood ran down fresh cuts along her bare abdomen, arms and legs. Her feet and hands looked discolored from the cold, and the woman screamed again as the orc man slashed her once more. "I can't believe those idiots sold you to us." His maniacal laughter was filled with cruelty. "Now we have bait to lure the beasts in. Oh, and don't worry. If you survive, we won't let a piece of you go to waste." He cut her again, eliciting another scream. Clay counted at least 14 orcs standing or moving around the perimeter of the fire as they neared. The orcs had cleared an area around the fire pretty well. And every one of the orcs seemed to be wielding metal-tipped spears. A roar suddenly issued from the other side of the fire, and Clay heard an orc scream before it abruptly cut off. Instantly the leader's attitude changed. "Stay alert, they're here. I knew that bitch's blood would draw them to us. Get ready. Kill as many as you can, boys. We'll eat good tonight," the orc leader bellowed, raising a spear. Orcs began to move forward, and a feral scream issued from not far away from where the orcs moved to cut off, as the orcs were able to use numbers to their advantage to bring one of the beasts down. To his right he saw a large cat pounce on an orc. Another orc threw a spear, but it missed as the large mutated beast moved, swiping at another orc as it disappeared again off to his left. Clay couldn't believe how fucking fast that thing was. And big. What the fuck were these orcs thinking? He turned to his companions and said, "We only have one chance here. Hope they kill each other. Try to stay together." Dawn whispered from right behind him, "What if they don't?" He could hear the fear in her voice. He didn't have to turn around to see her to know she was scared shitless right then. He looked at them as they crouched not far away from the radius of the firelight. "In that case, it was a pleasure knowing you all. Here we go." He saw an orc leap at Jill as she tried to raise her shield. She managed to get it high enough. The spear was deflected as she swung her new flanged mace at the man's torso. "Divine wrath," she called as the mace connected with a sickening thwack, as ribs exploded just from the impact. The blow did more than that though, as everyone witnessed a golden light envelope the orc as it was suddenly launched backwards about 12 feet. The orc seemed to splatter as it connected with a tree, the golden glow fading instantly. Jill looked surprised. "Holy shit. I did that." Tanya was nodding, eyes wide. Another big black cat was brought down just inside the firelight, several spears sticking out of it. 2 orcs had fallen under the beast's claws though. Off to his right, he saw another large cat pounce on an orc. Another orc threw its spear, but it missed, bouncing off the large mutated cat as it moved, swiping at another 2 orcs as it disappeared again into the darkness of the surrounding forest. "Fuck," he mumbled, "those damn things are fast." Another scream followed by a feral growl, and Clay noticed the orcs looking around, worried. He realized they had walked into a fucking honey trap and they were stuck in it. He glared hatefully at the apparent orc leader. He had been careful to avoid anything that might be even remotely life-threatening since the fucking giant bear. And now that motherfucker. His adrenaline was starting to flow, and as an orc came running at them screaming, he swung his axe, catching it in the side as he ducked the spear thrust. He let out a roar as he heard the woman screaming again, this time over and over, only stopping as she sucked in air to scream again. His blow sent the orc away into the dark, and the man's scream cut off as well. A burst of energy burst from Clay as he roared at two more orcs running at him. Then it looked like they hit a wall and skidded to a stop, trying to backtrack away from Clay as he heard. Aura of Malice activated. Chris said. Then a big-ass mutated black cat was in the middle of them, claws and fangs rending. It received many stab wounds though, and one spear managed to strike it in the left eye. It swatted the first orc, opening 4 deep cuts in the orc's back and biting another, taking the orc's right arm off at the shoulder. Within moments, only 4 orcs surrounded it. 3 of its kind were dead around the fire, and 2 more were running away after grabbing an orc and disappearing back into the forest with their prize. He heard Tanya behind him, mind blast. And something hit the ground not far away as he moved through the trees, and closer to the fucktard that had unintentionally caught them in the same honey trap. One orc lunged at the wounded cat with his spear and was successful, but as the spearhead sank into the cat's side, it snapped its paw out, catching the orc's face with a vicious slash of its claws. Another orc stepped in and stabbed the beast in the neck and managed to leap back out of its reach as it swiped at him. The other 2 orcs attacked almost in unison, one spear biting deep into the beast's side and the other piercing its back left leg all the way through, though it cost the orc a brutal slash down his chest and stomach and sent him flying away into the dark. He could tell the orcs weren't going to be able to do it alone, and he was much better prepared to deal with people his size rather than another giant fucking beast. Grab a spear off the dead orcs and try to stay out of its reach. With that he moved forward, cautiously picking up a discarded spear and sending his axe back to his spatial storage space. He saw Jill grab one off a nearby body herself. Tanya already had a broken half-spear in one hand. Only one orc remained standing near the giant mutated cat as he turned back towards it. The cat hobbled towards it, slowly. The orc, seeing its doom in the glinting green eyes of the cat, threw its spear and turned to run. Clay was already moving pretty quickly but was still not close enough to attack. The spear stuck in the cat's front shoulder, causing it to stumble momentarily. It didn't save the orc though. With a ferocious feline growl, it managed to leap the 9 meters, landing on the orc like a house cat pouncing on a field mouse. Clay didn't wait, he knew they had to end it soon. As he rushed forward, he threw the spear with all his might. Instantly he summoned his bearded axe into his hand. He heard the roar as it sank deep into the beast's right side, and as its head snapped around he could see the gleam in its glowing green feline eye as its one good eye fixed on him. Jill took a running leap as she stabbed at the beast, forcing it back into an awkward stance as she wounded it. The cat flattened its ears as it swiped at her while trying to jump away. That was where Dawn and Sigrid were though, and as it moved it snapped the spear sticking through its back leg, and it stumbled, knocking them over as both women managed to stick their spears into the cat. Sigrid managed to stab it through its neck, and as she was bowled over, Clay saw she was covered in blood as the cat let out a scream and swatted her. She had just rolled up on her feet and she was knocked away with a grunt of pain and a shit. She took her spear with her. Clay was already within striking distance and in motion, swinging his axe. He opened a large gash down its left side as it tried to react, and Luke stepped in, plunging his spear deep into the cat's belly before hurriedly rolling away. Just in time too, as the beast's claws tore a large gash in Luke's pack as he rolled away, spilling items everywhere with a loud clatter. Clay immediately reversed his axe swing and with a loud, "Ah!" he buried the spike into the cat's skull right by its ear. He was instantly thrown to the ground, the axe handle ripped out of his grasp. The beast reared up and pawed at the axe. It tore his axe free finally with a feral scream, and as it came back down, staring hate from its one good eye. "Mind blast," Tanya said, stepping up beside him as he started to rise up on his knee. The beast jerked oddly as it shook its head, let out an odd whine, and staggered sideways away from where Jill had just appeared again. It slammed into a large oak tree and collapsed, dark red blood leaking from its mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. "Yes," came Jill's elated voice. "We did it." "Sigrid," came Tanya's worried voice. She had rushed to the young woman who was slowly sitting up. Sigrid was bleeding from 3 pretty deep scratches but was alive and moving. Amy had hurried over and her hands were already glowing as she worked on healing her. Clay saw Dawn stab a passing orc in the neck as it missed her with its spear. The man dropped like his strings had been cut. He didn't see Luke immediately though, but soon spotted him. He had already made his way to the woman tied to the pole and cut her free. With some difficulty he was hobbling back towards them, using the spear heavily as he tried to remove some strain on his still wounded leg. He was carrying her back to Amy and Dawn while mumbling something Clay couldn't make out. "Please help me," came a weak plea from nearby. Clay looked around and soon found a wounded orc. He knelt and slit the man's throat. Even if he didn't already think these people were stains on society and didn't deserve to breathe the same air as the rest of them. By seeing how they treated that woman, Luke had gotten to Dawn. He didn't like the vulgarity their leader had been spouting anyway. The man wouldn't have survived long regardless. His guts had been torn out and his spine was fractured. "No, no, no, please," came another pleading cry off to his right. Jill had rolled one of the orcs over. It had been crawling away. She raised her mace, having left the spear behind. "I'll show you how to get in our shelter. Please." Jill raised the mace to strike. Her silhouette in the flickering firelight looked almost primal. Seeing Clay, the orc stuck out his hand as if asking him directly. "Women, we have women. Not many, but spare me and everything in the shelter is yours," he whimpered. "Please call her off." The orc pissed itself as Jill wrinkled her nose in disgust and looked at Clay as if asking, "What the fuck do I do?" Her flanged mace still held high, ready to strike. The orc, seeing Jill hesitate and differ to Clay, took the opportunity and licking his dry cracked lips said, "We were staying in a defensible cellar. Only Fred was left to guard the door. I can get you in if you just spare me. I swear it's all yours." Clay raised his hand to let Jill know not to kill the orc. One of its arms was dislocated and he was bleeding badly out of a serious cut across his lower back. The wound wasn't life-threatening. "Yeah. Take us there. If you're lying or you try anything funny, we'll kill you. Understand?" Clay asked, a dangerous tone in his voice. The orc nodded vigorously, grimacing at the pain from his wounds. "It's not far. Todd didn't want to transport the meat any farther than we had to from them." Clay cringed thinking about eating the mutated beast's meat. Cooked or not. Jill roughly grabbed the orc's shoulder and jerked him up on his feet. "Which direction? Let's fucking go, please. Please try something so I can smash your face." Her bloodthirsty smile sent a shiver down Clay's spine. The orc physically paled as she shoved him in the direction he indicated. Sky Rain Chapter 17 Cellar June 27, 2025. Clay looked around at the scene before him. Bodies lay everywhere, and every once in a while as Tanya or Luke found a wounded orc, they made sure they wouldn't have to worry about them anymore. Not that there were many. The giant cats managed to cause a lot of wounds that disabled or incapacitated their victims. He looked back at Amy and Dawn, who were taking care of Sigrid and the other woman. "Can we move yet?" he asked them. He heard Amy mumble something as a soft green glow enveloped her hands again as she started healing the woman the orcs had been using as bait. The woman let out a gasp, and Clay knew exactly what she was feeling as he watched the cuts start to close and realized she was in nothing but a thin pair of underwear. It was easily in the upper 30s with the wind chill, and he quickly summoned a blanket from his spatial storage space and handed it to Dawn for the woman. Luke soon returned to his shredded pack and took out his sleeping bag and piled everything into it that had strewn across the ground as he rolled away from the giant cat's swipe. Luke even threw the torn backpack inside, wadded it up as he picked up his walking stick and 2 spears and hobbled over to them. Tanya was now holding a knife to the orc, keeping him quiet as everyone else searched the dead bodies for anything useful. There wasn't much, and soon Sigrid stood, her UMSL jacket torn, and he could see bare skin from her midriff. She had some crude, puckered fresh scars that hadn't been attended to properly, and they had left jagged white streaks on her soft pale pink skin. She walked over to the cat, and Clay's attention was drawn to the orc as he swayed. He had lost a lot of blood, but Tanya held him tightly with her knife against his neck, the point having drawn a small trickle of blood. Just as he was about to say something about needing to move, Amy's hand stopped glowing and she slumped to the ground, panting. Dawn moved to help her up, and he heard her say, "I'm okay, I can still manage. I'm just a little tired is all." She waved her hand. "All right, better hurry up, it's already past midnight." "How far is it?" he asked the orc. Tanya squeezed the man's dislocated shoulder, and with a painful cry he answered, "About 400 yards that way." He pointed into the darkness. Luckily the path leading to the cellar was quite well used, and as their eyes adjusted from moving away from the light, they were easily able to follow it. Sure enough, the burnt 2-story remains of a farmhouse came into view. Off to one side was a cellar door, concealed and secure at the bottom of 7 steps. Clay motioned for the orc to go first and followed close behind. He didn't bother with his axe, instead he held his buck knife against his back near the man's kidney. The orc swallowed hard and knocked 3 times, paused, and then knocked 3 more times. The door opened with a loud clang and a gruff voice came out. "About time you guys got back. How fucking long does it take to skin the dam?" He was cut off suddenly as Jill plunged a spear into the dumbfounded orc guard's collarbone, snapping the feeble bone and plunging it deep into the man's chest. She had been waiting patiently from the edge of the cellar entrance for the man to step close enough to the door to be stabbed. The orc that had led them there started begging Clay immediately, and Clay could hear water dripping from its pants leg as it pissed itself again. The man was shaking and whimpering in fear. Clay jerked the man's shoulder violently. "How many more?" he asked as the door guard hit the ground, lifeless in the doorway. Jill's spear having found the man's heart and ended its miserable life. Clay dug the tip of the knife into its lower back near the large slash from the mutated cats. "None, I swear. All the women should be locked up in the room off to the right, and the supplies are in the back. I swear," came the orc's cry. He reached over and opened the door all the way. He could distinctly make out sweat and alcohol wafting out from the cellar. He grabbed the man by the shoulder and roughly led him inside. After a quick inspection, Clay could tell the man had told them the truth. It didn't take long for everyone to move inside the stinking cellar. It was shelter after all, and the night was already early morning. He made the orc help remove the dead body from the doorway, and then he led the lone male survivor from the group of orcs a good way away from the ruins of the burnt-out farmhouse and told the man in a dangerous tone, "Run and don't fucking stop." With his hands tied behind him, it was effectively a death sentence if the man couldn't get them free soon enough. It was only paracord, so Clay knew he could work with a sharp rock to eventually cut through it. The orc just grunted, lowered its head and began to move as quickly as it could northward through the trees. Clay looked up at the hazy night sky and let out a sigh as he sheathed his knife. He should probably have just killed the man, but he hadn't. He shook his head and turned back towards the cellar. He didn't know what kind of mess awaited him there, but after about 5 minutes of walking, he heard the orc he had just let go scream in fright before it suddenly sped away, the screaming becoming distant very quickly before disappearing. He could vaguely make out a large winged beast as it flew past overhead only a few moments later. Clay could hear it land near the bonfire and the large dead cat corpses. Clay found himself very thankful for having the orc take them to the cellar now more than ever, as another large flying beast flapped its wings to kill its momentum before settling down near the other one. He hurried back to the cellar, not wanting anything to spot him as it flew overhead. Luke let him in the door as soon as he heard it was Clay outside. The man looked worried about something, and Clay found himself asking, "What's wrong?" Luke just shook his head and sat back down on a crate. Clay could see he was sewing his rucksack back together. It took him a minute to respond. "It's bad, Mr. Clay. I never imagined I would see people sink so low. Never. It's despicable." Luke shook his head in disgust and spat off to the side. "Nobody deserves to be treated like that, especially not fucking kids, and not like that." Clay knew exactly what the man was talking about. He had seen the girls handcuffed to pipes running through the ceiling rafters as he cleared the room of hostiles and then left them to be dealt with by the rest of the group. Seeing his reaction, Clay had to ask, "How bad is it?" Luke just looked at him and shook his head. His clenched jaw told Clay everything he needed to know. He patted the man's shoulder and asked, "Can the ladies handle it?" "I hope so, Mr. Clay. I sure as hell don't know what to do." Luke continued to shake his head as he went back to sewing. Clay took a breath, let it out with a slight sigh, and then stepped into the main chamber. Jill immediately stepped in front of him, worry etched on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked, looking him over for any wounds he might be ignoring in the dim lantern light. He gestured as he said softly, "I'm fine, how's the others?" He looked around her as if weary of what he was going to see. She immediately answered as if she had been expecting his question. "They're fine, She stopped, then looked nervous as she grabbed his hand. "The others are busy and I wanted to take this opportunity to express my feelings, Clay." She blushed scarlet even under the thin facial fur Clay could only make out when she stood this close. "Unlike someone else," she waved to the room with Tanya in it, "I have some self-control." She looked into his eyes, her crisp blue eyes seemed to look right into his damn soul, and he was cussing himself for even thinking he could take care of this woman who deserved so much better than what he would ever be able to give her. Especially now the way the world had gone to shit. She stepped in closer, one hand still laced with his as she wrapped the other around his middle in a gentle embrace. "I have feelings for you, Clay. I know I look different, and you don't seem to care. But I was truly interested in you even before this clusterfuck we call reality took a sharp right turn into a fucking shit show." The hair on the back of Clay's neck stood on end as if he were in danger. She lowered her voice as she placed her head on his chest. "I just wanted you to know I don't care about any of it. As long as I'm with you." With that, she pulled away enough to raise up and kiss him. He couldn't help but groan as she pulled away and walked towards the back room, her hips swaying so provocatively he could feel his blood pressure rising in his pants from the view. "I'll see what kind of supplies they have." He had to shake his head to clear the image of her swaying hips as she strode away. Those fucking blue jeans looked to be painted on her. He couldn't look away until she was finally out of sight. That seemed to break the spell she had on him, and he turned to see what Dawn and Tanya were up to. He noticed Amy was already in the room Jill had disappeared into. That left one room, and as he turned to walk that way he nearly collided with Tanya, who was standing right behind him. She was so short and moved so silently he hadn't heard her approach. She had a mischievous grin on her face as she noticed his startled look. "Oh, what are you doing?" she asked, looking at the door Jill had disappeared through. He was caught off guard and started to stammer, tripping over his tongue. I was just getting ready to find you, as a matter of fact." He managed to stammer as she stepped even closer. He could swear he could feel her perky nipples on his abs. She flashed him an ornery look and her right hand grabbed his now engorged cock. "Tanya, She let out a giggle as she squeezed it gently and stepped back. Clay found himself even more flustered. He didn't know how to deal with this shit. "Oh, don't worry, I'm willing to wait." She licked her lips like she was eyeing an expensive steak. "You can even say no." She looked down at the bulge in his pants before looking back into his eyes. "But someone else is yelling, 'Pick me.'" She giggled again, looking around, pulled her shirt up and flashed him. "Just something to think about." She winked flirtatiously as she resituated her perfectly perky C-cups in her bra. He was still standing there with his mouth open when she stepped up next to him and gave him a peck on his cheek before hurrying towards the supply room. He knew without looking his face was as red as the Coke sign hanging crookedly on the wall behind him. How the fuck is a man supposed to deal with this fucking mess? Just one woman almost bled me dry. And why now, for some godforsaken reason, would I draw the attention of two drop-dead gorgeous women? What the fuck? He said to himself as he growled. He looked back at the door Jill and Tanya had gone through and still didn't have an answer to those questions, as he decided it was a mess he would just have to figure out later. He still had to make it home. He moved to the door on the right and stopped, bracing himself mentally. He always dreaded dealing with Doc. The woman acted like she wanted to stab him half the time. He knocked twice. "Dawn, is it okay to enter?" he asked softly. Could you give us a moment please, Mr. Clay?" came Dawn's response. "Of course. I'll wait here until you tell me it's clear, Doc," Clay said. He could hear several female voices and he looked back to where Luke was sitting, remembering his words, and grimaced himself. Must have been pretty fucking bad. After a few minutes, he heard Dawn call out it was okay for him to enter, and he braced himself for whatever was waiting for him. As he stepped through the door into dim candlelight, he instantly smelled body odor and the coppery smell of blood. His eyes were drawn to 4 sets of handcuffs still draped over a metal pipe running overhead. Dawn was putting medical supplies back into her pack and gave him a nod. "They'll live, but not without help." She pointed at a quilt that shook visibly. He could see the woman that Luke had saved. She was maybe in her mid-20s and looked at Clay as if he had an extra head growing out of his neck. She hugged the quilt protectively. "Please don't kill them, I'll do anything." She slid forward as if to submit herself to him, but kept herself between him and whoever was under the quilt. "They're just girls. Please don't hurt them," she sobbed, and Clay could hear 3 more girls whimpering under the quilt behind her as she spoke. He raised a hand, trying to reassure the woman, who looked at Dawn as she started to panic. "Don't worry, I told you we won't hurt any of you," Dawn said, trying to reassure her. "This is Mr. Clay. He's just going to take a look at your condition so he knows what I say is true. Now stop that." Dawn chastised them gently as she walked over and pulled the quilt back to allow Clay a look at the girls' conditions. Bruising covered most of the green orcish bodies that Dawn uncovered, as well as fresh cuts only recently healed. Bandages covered wounds that were too severe for Amy or Dawn to heal with their available mystical points, or were too old for the ability to affect. Dawn tucked the quilt back around them and patted the woman on the edge of the bed's shoulder reassuringly. He looked over at Dawn, who looked ready to argue about something. He cut her short, though, in a soft voice. "We won't leave them behind. But we'll need to move soon, Doc. Those fucking bodies are already drawing in scavengers. And big ones." He looked back at the quilt and then said, "Good work, Doc. I'll have the other women help me find some clothes for them. Can you and Amy get them ready to move?" he asked, not expecting to be able to move for a while if Dawn had her say. "Make sure they eat well. Any water we can't take with us, let them use to bathe." He stepped back out, closing the door softly behind him. He closed his eyes and took a long, deep breath. Not one of the girls under the quilt had been over 16 or 17, and he understood what Luke had said even more so after seeing their haunted, blank eyes. It made him want to go back and kill those fucking orcs himself. When he opened his eyes he saw Sigrid looking at him. She had changed her shirt and had a small Coleman gas burner with a pot on top starting to simmer. She added some things and went back to braiding a leather cord. The look she gave him made him shiver as it vaguely reminded him of the unabashed affection Tanya kept throwing his way. This look though made him feel like he was being slowly cornered. Where Jill and Tanya were obvious about it, she acted more like she was biding her time. Like a patient hunter waiting to spring the perfect trap. He smiled at her, and she realized she had been caught staring at him and quickly went back to focusing on braiding the leather cord and stirring the pot occasionally. But as he walked past her he could swear he heard her fucking purring as he walked by. Amy, Jill and Tanya were busy organizing the supplies. A large stack of canned goods and bottled water sat on an old folding table. There were no clothes though that he could see fit for anyone to wear in sight. He determined he and Jill would go out to a few nearby houses and see if any clothes were available for the young women. "Hey Jill, you mind helping me find some clothes for those girls tomorrow? They can't travel like they are now," he asked her. For some reason the question seemed to surprise the three women. "Sure can, hun," Jill replied with a smile. Tanya shook her head. "I'll go too. An extra set of eyes couldn't hurt and I'm sure everyone else can manage without us for a couple hours," Tanya said with a smirk, slyly volunteering to go with them. He was getting tired, and he soon found himself leaning against a concrete cinder block wall of the cellar and quickly fell asleep. He was warm. And comfortable. He could stay like this forever. Had the end of the world as he known it just been a dream after all? And it smelled so good. He'd smelled that before. What was it? Something fuzzy brushed against his arm and he instinctively reached over and patted the soft thigh that was draped over his waist. Life couldn't be any better. His eyes snapped open and he put the smell with the soft thigh. Tanya was lying next to him under the quilt he had used to cover up with. He could tell his clothes were still on, and he was definitely still alive by his body's reaction. When he tried to move though, he was even more surprised to find Jill tucked under his other arm. All of them were under the quilt. He sighed, resigned to lay there and fucking enjoy this before either of them woke. Or he had to move. He found himself smiling from ear to ear. This was nice, he thought, looking from Jill to Tanya. He just wasn't sure he could pick one. He closed his eyes, silently asking any higher powers for their assistance while enjoying the feel of both women. He didn't know how long he lay there, but eventually, a slim hand shook his foot and Dawn said, "Mr. Clay, you said, wake you for your watch. I'm sorry for disturbing you all." He opened his eyes and saw Dawn blush as she started to turn away. He carefully extracted himself from the two women, careful not to wake them. Sky Rain Chapter 18 Lucky Draw June 27, 2025. No need to be sorry, as far as I can tell we're all still decent. Clay didn't want to tell Dawn he had been enjoying himself probably more than he should have been. And nobody would get him to admit he'd copped a few feels. Just trying to stay warm. He covered the two women back up as neither of them woke when he slid out from in between them. They had both snuggled into the spot his body had left, instinctively moving towards the warmth. He stretched as he stood up straight. He couldn't fully because of how short the ceiling was, but he smelled something he hadn't smelled in a while. "Coffee," he said as it clicked in his brain. His eyes immediately locked onto a percolator softly brewing on the Coleman burner. Luke sitting nearby, his pack now fixed and a spear being slowly sharpened in his hands as Clay could hear the soft whisk 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 as he rubbed the spearhead back and forth along a dark, flat stone. It mixed softly with the sounds of others sleeping still. He walked over to sit across from Luke by the coffee, flipping a milk crate over to sit on. He summoned his tin coffee cup out of his storage and waited patiently for it to finish brewing while stifling a yawn. He noticed the little golden orb blinking again and wondered when it had started. He focused and opened his status screen. Clay Benton, human male, age 40 titles. Zombie Slayer level, 10 class, sovereign health points, 450 of 450 mystical points, 82 of 82 strength, 30 dexterity, 30 intelligence, 24 wisdom, 22 passive abilities, adaptable conversion, eyes of insight, enhanced virility, touch of the divine, lesser spatial storage, aura of malice, regenerate skills, vicious strike, frenzy, eldritch bolts, web bomb, bone spike. Unread system messages 2. 2 unread system messages? When the fuck did he get those? He shrugged, guessing it had to have been after he had passed out. He focused on the first one and it popped open. Congratulations. The host has acquired enough followers to be granted a settlement core. Settlement cores can only be used once. Upon consuming the settlement core, the host can designate a 1,000 by 1,000 yard area to become a designated settlement. The settlement will automatically be centered on the host's location upon using it. This area must be named upon consumption. Chris said. Acquired loyalty monitor to status screen. Current average loyalty of host's followers, 52%. Chris said. Please continue to increase your followers' loyalty. Lucky draw system initiated for gaining an average loyalty of 50% or greater. Congratulations. The host received 5 lucky draws. Initiate your draws? Please select yes or no. Chris said. Yes. He said hesitantly. Not sure of what was going to happen next. Ding. The host has received 1 mythical level item blueprint, usable on any weapon in the host's possession. Ding. The host has received 3 godly mystical potions. When used, they increase the user's mystical point total permanently. Ding. The host has received the one-time use skill book Gravity Spike. Ding. The host has received an ability or skill upgrade elixir. Ding. The host has obtained an armband of spatial storage. 5,000 by 5,000 feet area. Chris said. Thank you for playing. Remember, increase your followers' loyalty to receive bonus draws. The items appeared in his storage space except for the armband, which appeared in his hand at first, but the silver band quickly turned into an armless dragon in his hand. Without warning, it rushed up his forearm and circled his arm just above his bicep. Then it bit its tail and formed snugly against his skin as he gained access to the spatial storage inside the armband. Oh wow! Clay exclaimed as Luke looked startled by the armband's sudden animated transformation. What the hell is that? Asked Luke. That's my new storage device. Clay said. It does the same thing as my spatial storage, except it's much, much larger. Luke looked at it and then shrugged. That's pretty cool. How the hell did you get it? He asked. Clay explained the new settlement core, the follower loyalty monitor, and the lucky draw as far as he understood it. Seeing him glance at the percolator, Luke waved. Coffee should be done, Mr. Clay. He waited for Clay to pour his cup and held out his own, which Clay filled before setting the percolator back on the burner. Luke took the lid off and slowly poured about 2 cups of water back into it from a water bottle, and replaced the lid. Before long it started brewing again, the smell like a hint of life before the apocalypse set in. He sipped his coffee, cradling his cup with a large calloused hand. That's good stuff. He said as he found himself looking back at the quilt he'd crawled out of and the 2 women still sleeping in it. You realize that those 2 argued for nearly an hour before finally agreeing to both slip under the quilt to keep you warm. Luke chuckled as he shook his head at Clay's uneasy look. Clay sighed. He liked Luke. He had liked John too. He didn't have many friends, and he knew it was because of those fucking walls his shrink kept informing him he threw up whenever he could. Unfortunately, a side effect he had to work through. He decided to try to talk to the man. Who knows? Luke might be the next Casanova waiting to drop some wisdom. I have no idea why they decided I was their right guy. He shook his head. Before all this. He waved his hand at the door to the outside. I hadn't really wanted to have a relationship. Yeah, maybe I was flirting with the idea with Jill, but it wasn't serious yet. He took another sip before continuing. The last woman I had any feelings for turned out to be a fucking succubus and took me for everything I had and then some. He shook his head as he went on. I don't think I can go through that again. I don't know if I can let myself be in that situation again. He stared at the quilt with Jill and Tanya wrapped up in it, and his mind went in 100 directions, and still, none of them had an answer for him. Well, before this clusterfuck, I'd have probably agreed with you. He chuckled at Clay's puzzled look. Now all I can say is, he held up the spear tip to inspect it. Clay could tell the man had changed a lot since the giant bear at the interchange. If it's really the fucking apocalypse, he used the spear for emphasis, then why the fuck are you worried about rules, Mr. Clay? You're obviously a very capable man in their eyes, or I don't think they're the type of women who would willingly agree to crawl into a man's blankets together. He put the spear down and took a sip of his coffee. And with things the way they are everywhere, can you put yourself in their shoes for a moment? If you did, what do you think you would see looking at yourself? He started to put the stone away and added, look at everything they have been through with you since your journey began. How they were ostracized and not even allowed to enter the shelter in Chicago. And how you continue to step up and, whether you see it or not, shoulder the responsibility of leading us. He looked at Clay dead serious. You wouldn't believe what kind of catch those women think you are. I don't know what it is. But if you didn't have it before the sky rain, you seem to have found it in abundance now. Luke took another sip as he finished putting things away. Clay focused on his eyes of insight ability as he looked at Luke. Luke Grimmer, Beastman male, age 38 level, 8 class, warrior health points, 370 mystical points, 90 strength, 30 dexterity, 26 intelligence, 14 wisdom, 16 damn. Luke had leveled up quite a bit. He'd have to check the others later. It still irritated him he only received the numbers and not the skills when he used that ability. He thought for a moment and summoned the ability or skill upgrade elixir. It was a gold-flecked purple liquid in a small vial with a cork stopper. He popped the cork and quaffed the elixir down in one gulp. He felt a warm tingling sensation at the base of his skull and he instinctively knew it had worked. He focused on his Eyes of Insight ability and felt something change subtly. Ding. Congratulations. Your Eyes of Insight passive ability has evolved into Greater Eyes of Insight. Grants the host the ability to see another creature's stats, passive abilities and skills. Chris said. It didn't look like Luke had seen him drink the elixir. He was definitely going to take a look at everyone's fucking stats now. He looked back at Luke and focused on his Greater Eyes of Insight ability. Luke Grimmer, Beastman male, age 38 level, 8 class, warrior health points, 370 mystical points, 90 strength, 30 dexterity, 26 intelligence, 14 wisdom, 16 passive abilities Lux Muse skills piercing strike, vicious slash, rapid strike that was so much better. What the hell was Lux Muse? Did Lady Luck have something to do with the man's survival back at the interstate interchange with the fucking bear? Vicious slash and rapid strike sounded like pretty good skills too. He looked around and noticed he didn't see Sigrid anywhere. Where's Sigrid? He looked at the metal cellar door and could just make out a thin gray line around the edge of it. Then he looked at the only room with a closed door. The room containing the orcs and the woman Luke had saved. She said she would be back in a couple of hours. That leaves about 20 or 30 minutes left before we should start worrying, Luke said. Seeing his look he hastily added. She said she was going after some supplies she spotted on the way here. The man had sat back down and leaned back against the wall taking another sip. I can't believe she found this percolator. God, how I've missed this more than anything else. He raised his cup as if in salute before he started humming something softly to himself. Clay looked back at the quilt with the two women in it, then the metal door leading outside and then back at his cup of steaming coffee. I'll have to find some way to show her my gratitude. I think I'd have to agree with you on missing this the most. He took another sip. He hadn't known Sigrid had found the percolator. Hell, he didn't even know she was going out scavenging. They sat and talked quietly for about 15 minutes before a bang 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 sounded on the door. Not too loud but loud enough to get their attention. It's Sigrid. Are you there, Luke? Clay. Dawn. Anyone? Came Sigrid's voice. Jill and Tanya stirred, sitting up even though the bangs weren't that loud. Both women hurriedly looked for him and blushed as he smiled at them. Luke hefted the spear and stood, quickly reaching the door to flip the small viewport open. He hurriedly unlatched the door and grabbed a large black trash bag that was thrust through the door at him. What's this? Luke asked, propping the spear next to the door and taking the large bag. It didn't seem too heavy, but it had to be difficult to transport. Sigrid came through the door carrying two more similar bags and hurriedly closed the door with a look of relief on her face. She was flustered and obviously out of breath. Something large crashed to the ground not far away from the cellar. Her eyes were almost as big as silver dollars as she exclaimed, "Big fucking birds." She tossed the two bags to the side and stepped away from the door as a loud screech sounded from just outside the door. It was soon joined by another. The second screech had been farther away. After a few tense moments when everyone in the cellar was now awake and preparing for the worst, they heard a whoosh, and the screeching got farther away. Sigrid let out an audible sigh of relief. Where did you go? Clay asked. She held a finger up to let him know she needed a moment as she gulped in air. I noticed a house. She took another breath. We went by earlier with a pink bedroom. I could. She took another deep breath. Only found 2 houses with teenage girls' rooms. That's all I could find. She took another deep breath. She was starting to catch her wind. Clay figured she must have been running full out for a while by the sweat on her brow. She looked at Clay as if delivering a report. I think I managed to get them all some clothes and more importantly shoes. She was still breathing heavily as she took off her jacket. Sweat soaked her shirt. Clay summoned a bottle of water from his storage and handed it to her. She accepted with a thanks. Great work, Sigrid. He patted her shoulder. You saved us a lot of time and effort with these. Thank you. Clay flashed her a big grin. That was showing initiative. Maybe he wasn't babysitting her at all. He vowed to look at her in a new light. It didn't matter, she was still young. She was competent. That was fucking saying something in the current situation. He took another sip of coffee. And by the way, you're a fucking godsend for finding that. He hooked a thumb at the percolator. She shied away from the praise as he turned to see the dark-haired woman Luke had saved the night before opening the door to the room she and the orc girls had been asleep in, blinking sleep from her eyes as she held a blanket wrapped around her with one hand. Is that actual fucking coffee? She said, seemingly forgetting the strangers in the room. Eyes locked on the percolator. Sigrid grabbed a large bag and said, "Hey, I found you some clothes." The woman instantly lit up with a smile. Sigrid wasted no time in grabbing another bag and started towards the room. Amy was stirring too, stretching and putting her bedroll away. She took out her cup and walked over to pour her own. She carefully inhaled the aroma of the coffee before taking a sip, followed by an ah. Clay looked at Amy. She had dried streaks from where she had been crying for days. But the dull, defeated look that had been in her eyes wasn't there anymore. He smiled and said, "I know, right? If anyone would have told me coffee would be this hard to get before the sky rain, I would have laughed at them." He shook his head and moved back to the door. He took the opportunity to use greater eyes of insight on Amy. Amy Smith, Saint, female, age 30, titles: Combat Medic level, 9 class, Healer health points, 280 mystical points, 108 strength, 20 dexterity, 20 intelligence, 28 wisdom, 28 passive abilities: mystical sync, fearless, skills healing touch, touch of paralysis, regenerate. Oh, a skill called touch of paralysis. That could be useful as hell if you needed to make sure someone you had to work on couldn't thrash around. He'd have to remember not to get on her bad side. Having one healer who acted like Dawn was plenty bad enough. He still didn't know what he had done to piss her off, but it must have been pretty bad. She was civil and polite, but whenever he caught her looking at him, he would put the look she shot him as hateful and maybe a little hostile. Speaking of, he looked at her as she rolled her bedroll up and went to help herself to some coffee, and focused using his greater eyes of insight. Dawn Grimmer, human, female, age 36, titles: Witch of Aesculapius level, 10 class, Master Healer health points, 290 mystical points, 156 strength, 20 dexterity, 24 intelligence, 36 wisdom, 24 passive abilities: knowledgeable insight, sanctuary, void, null skills: healing touch, purge, restoration, healing light. He took it all in but had only the slightest ideas as to some of those abilities and skills. What the hell was void null? Sounded pretty cool though. He remembered healing touch and purge. That's interesting. She's made it to level 10 as well. Jill was the next one he used his skill on, as she asked if he needed a refill, and he accepted the rest of what was in that batch so they could make some more. He didn't care there were a few grounds in the bottom. It was fucking coffee. He focused on her nice posterior as she walked away, greater eyes of insight. Jill Fairbanks, Beastmen, female, age 39, level 10 class, mystical warrior health points, 410 mystical points, 134 strength, 28 dexterity, 28 intelligence, 24 wisdom, 26 passive abilities: track, infravision skills, smite enemy, divine wrath, shield bash. That's fucking sweet. Jill's turning into a tank. He could hear the big birds screeching occasionally as they passed overhead. He figured they would go to nest during the day if they were the same mutated birds he had seen the night before. It had looked like a nocturnal bird of prey, like an owl, just bigger and way meaner. It was still only about 7 in the morning though, so he figured give it a few hours, and if Dawn said it was okay for them to travel, they would head out. Those dead bodies nearby would attract way too much attention for him to even attempt to move past or through. Something would be fucking waiting. Soon Sigrid and Tanya came out of the room with the woman Luke had saved, whose name was Joanna. He used his skill on all of them, starting with Tanya. Tanya Lovingle, orc, female, age 33, level 10 class, Enchantress health points, 290 mystical points, 212 strength, 18 dexterity, 34 intelligence, 36 wisdom, 28 passive abilities: charm, mystical well, skills: bewitching gaze, mind blast, mirror image, dark bolt. He'd never seen her use mirror image before, but had a pretty good idea of what most of the other skills did. Next was Sigrid. Sigrid Reichman, Beastmen, female, age 22, level 9 class, sneak health points, 310 mystical points, 94 strength, 20 dexterity, 36 intelligence, 32 wisdom, 24 passive abilities: track, infravision, pass without trace skills: flurry of blades, mark target, rending claws. Well, he hadn't expected her to be a fucking thief. Next was Joanna. Joanna Duns, human, female, age 29, level 8 class, sovereign health points, 340 mystical points, 104 strength, 18 dexterity, 26 intelligence, 24 wisdom, 24 passive abilities silver tongue, enhanced virility, endurance skills bless, wail of the banshee holy shit. You're a sovereign too? He blurted out as he realized she had the same class as him. Joanna looked at him, her eyes going wide. Yes. I had the weirdest dream. She proceeded to repeat nearly word for word exactly what had happened to Clay when he received his system seed early. That's when he remembered he had a second system message waiting for him, so he opened it as she was speaking. Everyone was riveted as they listened, even the 4 orc girls that came out finally. He focused on the message when his status screen opened and it popped up. System side quest rewards enhanced due to increased difficulty. The host must return home. If completed, the host will be able to select from the following abilities or skills. Mystical Shield. Major Spatial Storage. Summon Golem. Greater Healing Light. Energy Lance. Chris said. Increased difficulty my ass. He said. Sky Rain Chapter 19 Salem June 27, 2025. Shortly after the sun was fully up, and the new normal dull gray-blue tone of the sky was filled with puffy black clouds moving fast to the east. The still full oak, maple and sycamore trees filling the Ozark valleys started to shed their now wilted dark green leaves as the temperature hung around 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was still June. Clay could feel something big was going to happen, and his intuition was screaming at him to get his ass home. Thankfully Sigrid had scored some clothes and shoes for the 4 orc girls and Joanna. Around 11 in the morning, having not heard the birds for a few hours by that point, they started out, finally heading south again. Before long they had worked their way up the snaky highway. They could see more forested areas interspersed with large brown fields laced with more and more patches of wooded areas, or an actual piece of the Mark Twain National Forest as they made their way further south. They could feel the elevation change. The hills got steeper and the highway seemed to mostly follow the ridgeline for a long way. As it started to get dark, they sheltered in a tall, 2-story white farmhouse right next to the highway. Surprisingly, Joanna and the 4 orc girls did very well. He was sure most of it was Joanna and Tanya who made sure everything went well with them. And the 4 orc girls seemed to be developing quite an attachment to Tanya. Clay wasn't entirely sure it was because she was an orc herself, but figured it probably had a lot to do with it. Amy and Sigrid seemed to dote on the 4 girls too, and everyone was getting along great. Clay noticed Joanna lingering around Luke throughout the day. The woman had talked to the man off and on through the day as he limped along. Luke didn't seem to notice her extra attention. They had an uneventful night and got moving early the next morning just after sunrise, or well, the brief glimpse of the fucking sun before it disappeared again as a bright orb behind the dull gray-blue sky. Within 3 hours they had made it to the end of the highway and a dilapidated old gas station that had been closed for years. A foggy haze hung low over the ground, making everything damp. To the south was a white-rimmed green sign that read Salem. Just as they crossed a small bridge, Clay could make out tall red brick buildings in the distance. A screech from overhead caused him to look up to see what made the noise as it flew by. Sigrid hit him suddenly from the side, causing him to stagger before he fell. He felt the wind off something that snapped really close to his face as he heard Luke yell, "Look out!" Then someone screamed, and as he raised up he could see one of the orc girls encased in a toothy green pod attached to a vine the size of Clay's fucking leg. He could see her legs sticking out, kicking as she tried to struggle against it. 7 or 8 more pods snapped at the rest of the party, and Sigrid had already rolled away and nimbly sprang to her feet, already holding 2 knives. He didn't have time to think about it though as he saw a pod open, the inside filled with large thorn-like teeth and an odd bloodshot eye that lunged for him. He quickly rolled away and came up on one knee. He summoned his bearded axe and drew it back, ready to swing. As he regained his feet he saw Luke stab the vine connecting the pod that was slowly dragging the orc girl back towards a huge black trunk laced with large orange veins with a wrinkled orifice at the top that looked a lot like a puckered alien's asshole. Clay witnessed a vine with a smaller pod toss a small rabbit into the orifice with a disgusting, sucking, popping sound like bones being sucked out of a carcass. His grip on his axe handle tightened as he swung at a snapping pod. As his axe split through the pod like a hot knife through butter, he heard a low, gurgling groan come from the trunk. Clay saw Luke and Jill finally get the orc girl out of the pod. Luke severed the vine as he said, "Vicious slash." The girl hit the ground as if she was paralyzed, her eyes wide with fear. Jill didn't waste any time as she grabbed her by her thin waist and threw her over her shoulder, fending off another pod with her flanged mace. "We need to get out of its reach," yelled Dawn as she guided Amy and the other women between 2 houses on the opposite side of the highway. It looked like there were 5 Tanyas running in every direction. Dawn and Amy were dragging Joanna, and Amy looked like she was covered in green slime or mucus. Clay slashed at a snapping pod, leaped over a writhing vine trying to grab his feet, its pod already cut off, and had to quickly throw himself to the side, rolling away as another pod that was closed slammed into the ground where he had been. He came up on his feet and used eldritch bolts, sending all 3 black watermelon-sized bolts laced with green crackling energy arching around each other, shooting forward and slammed into the black trunk. The mutated plant issued a louder gurgling sucking noise as it seemed to writhe in pain as the bolt struck. Each bolt sounded like a blunt object slammed into flesh at a high speed, resulting in sickening wet thwacks. Clay managed to evade yet another smaller snapping pod. Luke had worked his way over to the others, and Clay caught another large pod with his axe, bursting it open like an overripe melon, spraying him with the same green slime-like shit Amy had been covered in. He didn't have time to worry about it though, as he chopped another vine off that had nearly taken his head off. Ding. Congratulations. New passive ability acquired. Paralysis immunity. The host is immune to paralysis-inducing skills. Chris said. Not that he had time to pay attention to a message, he only barely heard it. He could see that Luke and Jill had made it to the rest of the group, and as he leaped over another swiping vine he was suddenly hit mid-air. Art. He slammed onto the ground, bouncing once like a fucking ball. His vision narrowed to seem like everything was at the end of a tunnel. A long dark tunnel. And then before he could even touch the ground again he was hit again mid-air. He crashed into the wall of a house, his vision burst with bright light for a moment, and then he hit the ground like a sack of potatoes, absolutely no chance to try to catch himself. Hell, he wasn't even sure what he hit. But the vine that had hit him had already had its pod cut off, and it hit Clay like a whip strike, opening a large gash in his chest that felt like lava as it burned into his muscle. Ding. Congratulations. New passive ability acquired. Cast iron stomach. The host can safely consume mutated flora and fauna and contaminated water without the chance of obtaining negative side effects. Chris said. He had managed to keep a hold of his axe though somehow, and he awkwardly managed to fend off another small snapping pod as he grabbed a nearby windowsill and hurriedly used it to help himself stand. Adrenaline suddenly surged through Clay's body, and ignoring the pain, he moved. He ducked under another large snapping pod, viciously hacked another smaller pod as it nearly bit his arm, and with a roar of effort, managed to round the corner of the house. He could see an open chain-link fence on the left and a tall wooden privacy fence on the right. He immediately went left, taking the easier road. He could hear vines and pods slamming into the wall behind him, so he dared not slow down. He could vaguely make out his name being cried out, but they were distant and getting further away every step. And then he was clipped in his left shoulder. The force of the blow flung him to the right violently through the privacy fence with a crash from the splintered boards. As he hit the cold ground and tried to roll up on his feet, something wrapped itself around his right ankle and jerked him abruptly backward with enough force to jerk his feet out from under him, causing him to face plant as he couldn't get his hands up in time to brace himself from the impact. His head bounced off the ground like a basketball. Thankfully the yard was full of thick, stiff, frosty grass and it cushioned the impact somewhat. The vine wrapped around his ankle started dragging him back towards the black trunk laced with pulsing orange veins. Fuck. He tried to swipe at the vine wrapped around his ankle, but the swing was intercepted by a medium-sized pod, knocking it away. He continued to flail around trying to get free when he was suddenly lifted off the ground and flung towards the center stem. He could see a large pod open and waiting as he awkwardly tried to turn in midair to meet it. He could have sworn he heard the stem gurgling as if in anticipation of a hard-earned meal. He swung again at the weird, bloodshot eyeball near the center of the open plant pod maw. As it struck, his axe sank deeply into the flesh-like skin of the pod. He tried to pull the axe back for another swing, but the thorny maw snapped shut around his arm, the thorny-looking teeth puncturing his skin as it snapped shut and flung him abruptly straight onto the ground. An oof escaped him as he had the wind knocked out of him, causing spots to appear in his vision as his ribs suddenly flared up like he had been hit by a red-hot iron. The thorny teeth had punctured his arm in multiple spots, leaving several long finger-thick thorns buried deep in his shoulder. He coughed, blood sprayed onto the back of his arm as he tried to stand again. His jacket and shirt were shredded into tatters as he rose to one knee using the axe to support himself. A large vine the size of his wrist wrapped around him and squeezed, pulling him upwards again. In only a couple heartbeats, he was upside down. A large snapping pod was coming straight for his face as he swung his axe to intercept it. As it struck the tree, let out another sickening gurgling, popping groan. The axe bit deep into the eye in the pod's center, but the pod snapped shut and wrenched itself away, taking his axe with it. He coughed again as he swung upside down and saw more blood spray. He knew that wasn't good. The vine that held him threw him violently to another vine much closer to the orange-veined writhing black trunk and its sucking, popping, sphincter mouth. Now he looked at the maw below him and hurriedly summoned his buck knife. He tried to swipe at the vine as he got closer to the sphincter. He tried to use his momentum by swinging against the motion as he tried to cut through the wrist-thick vine. He slashed deep into the vine as he tried to swing his weight away from the growing sphincter maw. Just as he cut deep enough, the vine released him and he fell. The sphincter mouth grew larger much faster as he cut through the air towards it. Clay had managed to throw himself sideways enough. He slammed into the orange-veined trunk, hard. The sound was like a sickening wet slap on bare flesh as he bounced off the fleshy mass and managed to get his feet under him as he hit the ground, hard, with a staggered hop-skip as he bled off the momentum of the fall and collision with the mutated plant after only a few paces. He turned quickly. He had spotted something pulsing near the base of the trunk as he recovered somewhat. He couldn't breathe. Again. His body screamed at him. There it was. A glowing, pulsing orange-colored heartbeat shone through a translucent membrane surrounding the trunk. He could see through the trunk's orange-veined black skin as his intuition was screaming at him to strike fast before the vines returned to finish him off, or finish feeding him to the giant fucking mutated sphincter plant. He could feel his chest burning badly. His arm with the thorns stuck in it was barely usable. He felt woozy as he forced his body to rush forward, lunging for the pulsing orange heartbeat. Clay vaguely noticed a large, bird-like eye rolling around trying to see him, its pupil a milky white color. His knife struck it, the sound like cutting through a large wet eggshell, and he was covered in thick orange mucus like blood. Ding. Congratulations. New skill acquired, multi-strike. The host's next strike hits the target 2 times consecutively. This spell can be synergized with other skills. Cost, 25 mystical points. Chris said. Ding. Congratulations. New passive ability acquired, resilience. The host ignores 30% of the damage received from attacks, passive abilities, or skills received in combat. Chris said. The stem let out another loud burbling screech as it writhed violently. The pods hovering around the trunk like a swarm of guardian snakes around their nest started falling to the ground, lifeless. They made odd squelching sounds as they impacted the ground, splattering in greenish goo. The stem continued to writhe and gurgle as his knife sank deeper until he felt something resisting the knife's tip. He gritted his teeth and used crippling strike. He heard a pop, almost like the tip of the knife busted through a light bulb from the strike. The stem immediately went rigid and started turning an ashy grayish white. Clay pulled his arm and knife free, feeling very weak as he turned around and fell to his knees. His vision was double and he could swear he could hear someone getting closer yelling his name. Why were they yelling? Didn't they know that would draw in more mutated beasts or opportunists? He was suddenly on the ground and he tried to rise back up but coughed blood up again. He looked at it. That was really bad. Was that foamy blood? Fuck. Congratulations. The host has absorbed enough alpha DNA to initiate evolution. This experience may be painful for the host. Please find a safe place in 5, 4, 3. Chris said. What the fuck? He tried to move but that last fall had pierced a lung and he couldn't even raise himself up. He grimaced as everything started to go black. So this was how he was going to die. Damn it. He had been so close to. He closed his eyes, letting a wheezing breath out as he did. Fuck it, he was ready to go fishing with Jake again. He honestly thought that this was the end of Clay Benton as he drifted away. Clay. You can't die. Cried Jill as she managed to reach Clay. It had taken them a few moments to realize that he'd managed to kill the damn mutated plant monster. And only dared to rush in once it turned that ashy grayish-white color. Clay was covered in blood, and an odd orange-colored mucus-like slime and some sort of dust as the mutated plant was disappearing as the wind blew the tiny particles of what appeared to be ash away. She carefully rolled him over as Tanya made it to him too. She let out a gasp and quickly knelt beside him opposite her. A faint golden light radiated from the deep wound in his chest and his body arched as he let out a blood-curdling scream. Both of them instinctively stood as if startled. The man was unconscious and Jill could have sworn he just got fucking bigger somehow. She heard several bones pop. The sound made her want to vomit as the veins through his chest, neck and arms bulged and started glowing as if a massive amount of energy was suddenly surging through his body's arteries. She heard Tanya gasp, "Oh please no Clay, you have to live." And the orc woman was kneeling again, grabbing his large, calloused hand. She was her rival for Clay's heart and she couldn't for a moment fault her reaction. She felt the same. "I don't know what's happening, but we need to get him to Amy and Dawn now." Do you think we can carry him? Jill asked, and Tanya looked up and nodded, tears already welling up in the woman's eyes. She reached down and patted her shoulder to reassure the woman. Don't worry. I don't think he'll die if we can hurry, she urged as she bent down and grabbed his arms. She nodded to Tanya to grab his feet. Tanya took the hint, and after a few awkward moments, they figured it out and were moving, panting hard from the exertion as they moved beside a small gray house, half burnt down and smelling heavily of charcoal and burnt carpet. Amy rushed up to them as soon as they rounded the corner with Clay, her hands already glowing as she tried to work her abilities. Regenerate. Nothing happened. The glow coming out of his veins and wounds didn't diminish at all. It's not working? Amy gasped as she tried again. Healing touch. Clay convulsed violently. His arms and legs thrashed as he arched his back and let out another long blood-curdling scream until his voice went hoarse. More bones popped as his muscles suddenly went rigid like corded wire, every muscle visible standing on end like he was being put through electric shock. As Dawn finally made it to Clay, she dropped down next to him, feeling his pulse. This isn't good. He's too hot, we have to cool him down quickly. The shredded jacket and shirts came off and Jill noticed Clay had steam coming off his body as he lay on the cool ground. What the fuck? Dawn quickly washed her hand off. She had gotten some of the orange mucus blood on her hand when she had checked his pulse and felt how hot his body temperature was. We have to wash this stuff off, I think its blood is some sort of poison. She quickly doused her hand with water and dried it off. And try not to get any of it on you, it's like having a highly potent local anesthesia in gel form. The women all nodded, and after some scrubbing Jill and Tanya had managed to remove the majority of it from him. She couldn't help but notice his chiseled muscles. They were extremely careful around the large gash on his chest and the thorn stuck in his shoulder from the pod. As they worked, the odd golden glow became less and less. After about 10 minutes it had nearly completely dissipated. So was the heat though, and Clay began shaking violently as his body temperature plummeted, going from one extreme to another. They quickly wrapped him in a blanket, and Amy, Dawn, Jill, and Tanya all four managed to move him inside a nearby house. Jill didn't hesitate to shed her damp jacket and crawl under the blanket with him, grasping his icy shaking body in a warm embrace. Please, Clay. Stay with us. She felt the blankets move, and Tanya was on the other side of him, worry etched into her usually smiling face. Don't you dare fucking die on us now, Clay Benton, Tanya said as she snuggled as close as she could. Sky Rain Chapter 20 Evolved Human June 28, 2025. You have to let me do something, cried the dark-haired woman as she lunged for the small pool of liquid ether the goddess Gaia had created long ago to view the odd blue world known in modern times as Earth. I can help them. No, Maya. It's already done. He's evolving already, Gaia said with a somber look on her face. It's up to him now. This shouldn't have happened yet. The goddess was shaking her head. Don't worry. The man's strong enough to survive this. I'm sure of it. Have some faith in him, came the gruff voice of Kronos, the old man, a stark contrast to the other two men currently in Gaia's godly demi-plane. Are you sure he's the one, Gaia? Asked one of the other men. He was tall and well-built, with bronze skin, and muscles chiseled like a Greek sculpture of Apollo where his toga didn't cover. That was his name, so the image fit. Gaia nodded. I'm sure of it. I can sense the others, but his soul has responded to the system seed much more favorably than we ever thought possible. It's almost like he had the essence of the gods already coursing through him even before he received the seed. She gestured at the image of Clay arching in pain as his bones and muscles grew in size and mass. It wasn't subtle. The steam came off his body as they watched the mortal women named Amy and Dawn trying to use their abilities on him as the system seed inside Clay Force evolved itself. That's horrible, grimaced the third man, Asclepius. I can't believe I let you all convince me that this was the only way. He had a look of pity in his eyes. The seed isn't supposed to evolve, Gaia. At least not for another 100 years. That should be impossible. So should access to the lucky draw system, but he acquired that already as well. You used the alpha mutant gene as the base to create the seed blueprint, Asclepius? Gaia asked. The bearded man was silent for a moment and then said, yes. It was the only catalyst that would sync with both the seed and human DNA. He shrugged. The man had truly tried everything else. Then it can't be helped. Gaia looked at Maya. How long until the next event cycle? She had a good idea of the number of days until the next wave of mutation struck, but with so many variables it was better to double-check her numbers. 15 days. The young demigod said. She was still watching as the women struggled to move him inside a house. The viewpoint changed to just above Clay as they lay him on the floor. The man shook violently. Then the question should be, which god or goddess gave him the essence if it wasn't one of us? Asked Kronos. Morrigan, said Gaia, her eyes glowing with divine menace. I swear if you interfered and cost us. She trailed off, not wanting to vent her frustrations with the other goddess in front of her current guests. Kronos cleared his throat, drawing all the other deities' attention to his elderly visage. I doubt she's that stupid. He looked back at Maya. So, 15 more days until the rest of the system is fully integrated. That's not much time. Has anyone spoken to Hephaestus, Vulcan, or Brocker? Apollo spoke up. Yes, the new system store will be accessible through the seed. All the smithies have been running non-stop since the initial development of the seed and the possibility of the store itself. He shrugged. Some of the other gods have been working with Maya to develop potion and elixir blueprints that could be easily produced for the system store. Some are already being produced in bulk. Gaia looked at all of them. This wasn't the first time they had tried to accomplish something like the system seed. The last time had nearly caused the extinction of the humans she so dearly cherished. She had a lot riding on this. If they succeeded, the gods would regain access to their lost realm. They had been locked out of it for a long time. Without having access to their home plane, their power was but a shadow of what it once was. Like a garden hose full of power where there should be a raging torrent of raw divine power. At one time, these passive abilities and skills were considered common among everyone on Earth. Unfortunately, the last seeds they had developed, called simply cores, had been unknowingly corrupted by Lucifer. The twat had caused Krakatoa to erupt to cover his ass once the others had figured out he had developed a way to steal the mystical points of everyone with a seed, nearly killing off humanity entirely. Only a few scattered, isolated tribes had survived to eventually repopulate the world, their mystical veins connecting the corrupted cores fried as they tried to use their abilities to save themselves, only to find out they inadvertently overloaded their circuits. Quite literally, as their mystical energy was siphoned off to power Lucifer's evil scheme for ultimate power. He had miscalculated the damage that the eruption had caused though, and shot himself in the foot as his power source quickly ran dry, and Michael and the others were able to lock him in his hellish demiplane prison for all eternity. Yes, I'm sure this is the gatekeeper. He's finally been reborn. We will be able to go home. Gaia said. The look of hope and longing on the other deities' faces was difficult to explain as they heard her words. If he survives, said Asclepius, stroking his beard as he watched the image of Clay and his companions. But if he opens the gates, won't the other worlds have access to them too? He nodded at the shaking Clay. They need more time. Jill could hear Clay's teeth chattering as he shook. He was unconscious and clutched at her and Tanya on the other side of him, desperate for their warmth. Tanya started to hum softly. Jill could see her rival gently tracing his muscles under the quilt. She could also tell the woman was being careful not to touch his wounds as she did so, her eyes glistening with moisture. Dawn and Amy had gone to tell the others what happened and see if Luke found some better shelter. But soon everyone showed up, one of the girls limping badly. They had spotted several more of those mutated plants, including a really big one that had snatched a very large mutated bird out of the sky right above them. Thankfully they had not been noticed. Jill could hear them talking as Clay slowly stopped shaking so violently. It's a fucking hive of those things, Luke said. And none of us know where the fuck we're going. All they could do was wait and pray Clay recovered quickly. He had asked several times over the last 3 hours as the sun sank lower and lower on the horizon how Clay was doing, and Jill couldn't say. He was still cold but not freezing like he had been. Over 3 hours Clay's wounds had mostly closed on their own. Deep bruising covered his body though. As the wounds closed, the weird golden glow seemed to dissipate completely, and Jill would say the man was sleeping peacefully as his breathing eased and his heart's slow rhythmic beating made her feel so sleepy. She looked up at Clay's face, at the man she had fallen in love with, and blushed as she saw the most insufferable smirk on his sleeping face. His large calloused hand groped her butt cheek as she tried to snuggle even closer. His bare muscular side was still nearly covered with a greenish-yellow bruise. The thorns that had been stuck in his shoulder were forced out as the wounds had closed. Please, Clay. I need you. She glanced up at Tanya, who had gone silent across from her on the other side of the man they both loved. The woman was asleep, tears streaked her face. We need you. Please wake up soon. She whispered as she lay her head on his shoulder and was soon oblivious as sleep quickly claimed her. What the fuck is your problem, little brother? Jake said as he moved to place a perch he had pulled out of Farmer Lloyd's pond while sitting in their flat-bottomed boat. You mean to tell me you of all people have 2 beautiful women laying next to your dumbass right now? And both of them are in love with you? And you can't make up your mind. He winked mischievously, but you're holding both their asses. He laughed so hard he snorted as Clay felt his face go red. Oh shove it, Jake, that's not even the worst part. Clay slowly reeled his line in with practice jerks to get the frog lure to look more appealing to the pond's largemouth population. So far he had only managed to catch some algae and a stick. I think they're conspiring to share me between them regardless of what I think. He paused as his brother laughed even harder while he worked at rebaiting his hook. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'll be sharing my blankets with both of them if they have anything to do with it. I've woken up to both of them next to me multiple times now, Clay said, shaking his head. He still had a hard time believing it himself. It sounded like Jake swallowed his tongue as he choked and spluttered mid-laugh. When he recovered he asked, "So, what's the problem?" "I don't know if I can, Jake. I mean, Mom would fucking scalp me if she were still alive and found out. I can practically feel her scowling at me," Clay said. "They're both good women. And with the way everything went to shit, how will I be able to provide for two of them? Hell, I can't even get everyone safely home." He grimaced. His brother was quiet for a while, the sound of water lapping at the boat as the cicadas sounded in the background. Finally Jake said, "Clay, pull your head out of your ass and wake up. Those women obviously love you way more than you think if they've already come to terms with each other. Think about it. You should be feeling like the luckiest man alive. And if it is the end of civilization as we knew it, then who says a man can't have multiple women? Hell, you were big on the Bible studies in Sunday school, everyone had multiple wives it seemed. I'd say if you can provide for them and protect them, then who's going to say shit to you other than them? After all, if they're good with it, why shouldn't you be?" Jake said as he finally finished baiting his hook and stood up to cast. Clay's brows furrowed in thought. He didn't say anything for a while as he truly thought about what Jake said. John and Luke had said similar things. Then he shrugged. "Ah well, if you could have given me that nugget of wisdom a few days earlier, I might have been able to do something with it." He absently touched his chest, he could still feel it burning. "Oh, and why's that?" Jake asked, flicking his line to set his hook in yet another fish. "Well, I'm pretty sure I died, bro. So I think I'd rather just stay here and fish with you." He casually reeled the line in another few feet, letting it sink a bit before giving it a slight jerk. "Besides, I never did make it home. You won't believe it, I'm pretty sure I died because of a giant asshole." Jake roared with laughter, even slapping his knee as he had actual fucking tears coming out of the corner of his eyes. He was laughing so hard. It took him a bit to regain some composure and said, "Little brother, I think you have a long, fruitful life ahead of you regardless of what the fuck this world throws at you. You're my brother." He continued to reel in the fish, which was surprisingly still attached. "Besides, I expect lots of nieces and nephews." He flashed him a shit-eating grin. "I can't." Clay started, but Jake cut him off. "Wake up, little brother, and see what's right in front of you," Jake said. Clay tried to say he was tired. He just wanted to stay there and fish. But his brother's voice became more urgent. "Wake up, Clay. Clay, please wake up." Came Jill's voice as his eyes snapped open. Everything burned like he had worked out after the workout, and he groaned as he remembered everything. "You're awake. Thank fucking God, we need to get out of here," Jill said as she raised herself up from where she had been lying right beside him. He noticed he had a hold of her ass cheek and quickly let it go, after giving it a good squeeze that elicited a gasp from her. Tanya quickly sat up on the other side of him and began looking him over in the dim light. "These made large scars," Tanya said as she traced one of the furrows in his shoulder gently that had been caused by the thorns of the pod that had latched onto him and thrown him to the ground in a brutal slam attack. "His side hurts just thinking about it." Tanya looked up at him as he looked into her suddenly surprised eyes. "Clay, your eyes are gold," she said in surprise. "What?" he asked, not hearing what she said. Jill grabbed his chin and turned his face towards her. Her eyes scrutinized his. "Oh my, that is quite different from the gray-blue they were." She leaned in, looking even closer in the dim light inside the house. "I think there are small flecks of red in them." He gently took her hand away and sat up slowly, expecting his ribs and chest to burn in pain. But instead he just felt a slight tingling. Everywhere there was a puckered scar, he could feel the tingling sensation. As he inspected his scars, Jill stood up and said, "Amy tried to heal them, but she said nothing would happen when she tried. And Dawn couldn't stitch you up. She said something about the wounds were healing too rapidly for it to do anything but hinder your own body's regenerative ability." She held out her hand to help him up, and soon he was standing in what he could tell was a living room. Jill, Tanya, Dawn and Luke, who were in the adjoining dining room, all looked up at him. His stomach let out a loud growl as he realized he was hungry, very hungry. Holy shit. exclaimed Dawn from the dining room. What the fuck, it's not even been 8 hours. How the hell does someone grow that damn much? And your eyes, are they fucking glowing? Came Luke's surprised voice, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Ah. Clay was at a loss. He was shirtless and his pants were too short. He didn't know what to say or how to react to this situation. So he did the only thing he could do. He strode towards the hallway to find a bathroom, having to duck to clear the doorway, and sure enough he could tell he was much larger. But as he looked in the mirror he could see his eyes were gold with red flecks. He could see really well in the low light too, as if he had a natural filter on his eyes that made everything sharper, the edges of everything more apparent. Well shit. We need to get out of here. I think that the big one can reach us here even if the little ones can't, said Luke. He was trying to urge everyone now that Clay was awake, that they urgently needed to get away from the hive of mutated plants. Something is going on to the east of the town. And I'm telling you all, we need to be going. Are you good, Clay? Amy asked, rubbing sleep from her weary eyes as she exited another room. I tried to heal you. I'm sorry I couldn't. She lowered her head as if ashamed of not being able to help Clay when he needed it. He figured it was because of her class. Being a combat medic and unable to help must have been frustrating, to say the least. I'll live. He flashed them a grin. I think I need some clothes though. I'm not sure what happened after that thing popped its cherry. He shrugged. Well, Sigrid managed to find some clothes that should fit you, Tanya said. Come on, I'll get them for you. She gestured to the door off to the right of the hallway. He ducked out of the bathroom and followed her in. There were several changes of clothes roughly big enough to fit him. What the fuck had happened? He quickly donned a new shirt and pants that fit again. He noticed his muscles were a lot more defined than they had been. And the fucking golden orb was flashing. But he didn't have time to think about it as Luke continued to urge everyone to get ready. They needed to leave as soon as possible. It was obvious to Clay he had changed quite a bit. Maybe he had been mutated by the damn plant's weird orange-colored blood? Well, regardless, it's fucking done now. He grumbled to himself. I don't feel much different though. That's gotta be a good thing. Right? Jill watched him like a hawk watching a chicken, and he couldn't help but flash her a toothy grin and a wink. She blushed slightly but never looked away as he changed and placed the clothes in his spatial storage space. Finally ready, he pulled on a Carhartt jacket that looked new and headed out the door. And almost walked into Sigrid. She held his axe in her hand and looked abashed as he said, Hey, thanks for finding the new clothes, Sigrid. I'm going to owe you big time by the time I get home. On my axe, thanks. Clay said as he took the axe out of her hands. You lost that and I didn't want you to leave it behind, so I went and got it for you, she said shyly. I appreciate that, Sigrid, he said and patted her shoulder as he walked by. What the hell? Was she purring? Again? He asked Luke as he entered the living room. What's going on? Something big is attacking the damn mutated plants which has them all on edge. We need to get out of here, Mr. Clay. Luke said he was dead serious. Whatever this something big was, Clay trusted him enough to know they needed to go. Luke hadn't ever given him a reason not to trust him. Alright, then we need to head due west, even if we have to take a slight detour or two. Then south to Highway 32. We're close enough now to tell you all. Everyone nodded, even the orc girls and Joanna were there and ready now. If we get separated, try to make it to the last point mentioned. If everyone isn't there, do your best to wait for the rest within reason. Shit can happen, especially now, let's be real. He looked at them and then outside at the brightening sky of a new day before he continued, Let's go, we need to get out of Salem and as far towards Montauk as we can get by dark. After 3 or 4 more minutes they were making their way through houses and side streets and eventually to another highway. Highway 72, where they crossed into a field of waist-high brown corn. With another hour of travel, they made it to Highway 32 and turned west. Shortly after dark, they settled into a brick house past a large white church where Clay couldn't wait for something to eat. Whatever it was, his stomach didn't care. But while he waited he accessed his status screen. Clay Benton, human male, age 40 titles. Zombie Slayer, evolved human level, 13 class, sovereign health points, 400 of 520 mystical points, 102 of 102 strength, 35 dexterity, 35 intelligence, 29 wisdom, 27 loyalty monitor, 54% passive abilities, adaptable conversion, greater eyes of insight, enhanced virility, touch of the divine, lesser spatial storage, aura of malice, regenerate, paralysis immunity, cast iron stomach, resilience skills, crippling strike, frenzy, eldritch bolts, web bomb, bone spike, multi-strike. Remaining ability points to be allocated, 15 unread system messages 4. When the hell did I level up? He exclaimed. Damn for system messages. He groaned.